Welcome everyone to these live internet studies week after week. My name is Ariel Ben Lyman Hanavi. This is an hour and a half long study. It's live in so much as if you're joining me via Teams, then you can join me for the live study and we can actually maybe have even discussions after the study is over. If you'd like information about joining me live every week, go to my website at www.tetzetorah.com. That's spelled TETZETORAH.com. Look at the very top of my website. See that little yellow banner, that little yellow strip running along the top where it says Live Internet Studies Info. Click that and scroll down into the page, and that is all the information you need to join me via Teams. It's free. There's no cost to you. You just need to click on the Teams link that you see in purple there. All right, each hour and a half long study is broken up into two segments. Segment one is entitled Eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events. Eschatology is the study of end-time topics like Book of Daniel, Antichrist, Jesus Olivet Discourse, Rapture, Views, Mystery Babylon, Book of Revelation, things like that. The second segment is 30 minutes long. It's entitled A Trinitarian Response to Biblical Unitarianism. It's an apologetic section. I am taking the biblical Trinitarian position, and my imaginary opponent in this kind of mock debate is biblicalunitarian.com. So let's jump right into the first segment, which is Eschatology, a biblical study of end-time events. Take a look at my screen right now. You'll see all of these topics. We've been working our way down through these topics. This is what many people call long study format. What that means is we just take our time and work our way down through the topics. I'm not in a rush. We've been at this for a few years. I don't imagine I'm going to finish this year unless Hashem hurries me along. But otherwise, I appreciate your patience as we work down through the issues. Each topic can take a while. We've been in topic 12 for about 5 months now. We're in the part where it says Rapture Views, a final analysis. What got us started into the particular section we're at right now is that gotquestions.org posed a question about what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Prewrath view of the rapture. Now, before I jump into their question, let's jump over to the differing views of the rapture. And so we can just take a look at what we're dealing with. Essentially, I'm working from the understanding of the historic premillennial view. I'm only looking at these four views. I know there are other views we could look at, but for this study, I'm only using these four. In no particular order, but just starting in the upper left corner, let's work our way down through these and just briefly identify them. We've got the pre-trib rapture in the upper left corner. They've got a rapture in the far at the very beginning of what they call a 7-year tribulation. Their second coming, by comparison, is at the far end. The pre-tribulation rapturists believe that the church will be raptured before this final 7-year period known as Daniel's 70th week. All right, let me shrink that circle a little bit. There we go. All right, the next one is called the mid-trib rapture in the upper right-hand corner. Their rapture is right in the middle, and their second coming is over on the far end. The mid-tribulation rapturists believe the rapture will occur exactly halfway through the 7-year period that they call the tribulation, and it'll happen just before the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Moving along, in the lower left corner, post-tribulation rapture. Their rapture and their second coming are synonymous with one another. They're right on top of one another. Post-tribulation rapturists believe the rapture will occur following the 7-year period known as Daniel's 70th week. I think that when you read down through the scriptures, that if you're zoomed out and you're not really paying attention to details, and details don't matter as much, that the post-trib rapture has a lot of traction. If you're not focusing on the big details, you're just looking at maybe answering the question, who's going to go through the hard stuff, then maybe that's where the pre-tribs and the mid-tribs get their traction, where they get their position as well. But we'll flesh many of these details out later on, but right now this is just looking at the 4 views rapidly. The final view on my list right here is the Prewrath rapture. Let me zoom in on this one so you can see, because this one's a little different. This is the one that I hold to, so let me give it a star. All right. This particular view has a rapture right here, and the second coming, or what we like to call is the concluding activity of the day of the Lord, happens near the end. So you can see the second coming here. I'm circling it. But the rapture itself happens in a different spot than any of the other 3. Let me read the little explanation down below like I did for all the other 3. Prewrath rapturists believe the rapture will occur following the opening of the 6th seal of the book of Revelation. The church will experience severe persecution by the Antichrist, but will be snatched away before God begins to pour out his wrath during the day of the Lord. So the Prewrath rapture gains its name from the fact that we go through the tribulation, the Great Tribulation, but we don't go through the time period known as the day of the Lord, God's wrath. Thus, the rapture sandwiched between those 2 events gives us our pre-wrath rapture, but not pre-tribulation. So what you should be noticing is that the pre-wrath rapture actually differentiates between what is known as tribulation and what is known as wrath. So that's going to do it for those 4 views. So let's go back over to gotquestions.org. They said, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the pre-wrath view of the rapture? In order to understand their question and why we challenged it, we Prewrathers, I'm a Prewrather, okay? I'm a Prewrather. Why did I challenge their position? Pre-wrath rapture puts the church in the middle of the 7-year tribulation time period. GotQuestions.org is a pre-trib outfit. They believe the church will be absent from any 7-year tribulation activity. And when they evaluated our view, strengths and weaknesses of the pre-wrath view, 2 of the things that they came up with, let's scroll down and show you what they think. One of the weaknesses that they thought was that we Prewrathers presume that the elect mentioned in Matthew 24 are church-age saints. Of course, we do mention that. We do believe that. By the way, so does post-trib. By putting the church into the 7-year time period, the church must face off against the Antichrist. And pre-trib, i.e. gotquestions.org, they say that that's a weakness. They also think that a proof of that is that Jesus talks about pray that your flight be not on the Sabbath. And since most Christians believe that they are released from any Sabbath obligation, they believe this is one way that Yeshua's saying to them that this is not the church I'm talking about, because obviously the church doesn't keep the Sabbath, so Jesus' words can't be directed to the church. I challenged that in previous teachings. However, we're looking at this one tonight. Another flaw in the pre-wrath rapture theory. This is according to gotquestions.org, which is championing the pre-tribulation rapture perspective. They believe the church will be gone before the 7-year time period kicks off. Thus, the church will not have to face off against the Antichrist. Here's what they have to say, and we're going to refute this tonight. Another flaw in the pre-wrath rapture theory is its teaching that the first seal judgments are not the wrath of God. Scripture shows that it is the Lamb who opens the seals, Revelation 5:5, and then jump over to 6:1 and follow. The whole chapter of Revelation 6 there is the giving out, or the giving of the details of the trumpets. I'm sorry, not the trumpets, the seals. They go on to say that no other man is found worthy to open them, right? According to Revelation 5. So if you jump back a chapter prior to them actually being opened, when you were looking at the seals, John records that no one is worthy to open the seals. Only Jesus, only the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. They go on to say that it would seem then that these are not man's judgments, but God's judgments, owing to the fact that Yeshua opens them. The tribulation begins when Jesus, so their concluding thesis here, hypothesis, is that the tribulation begins when Jesus opens the first seal, and from that point on, the wrath of God is meted out on a sinful world. So in order to understand why we have differing positions. Let me pull up a different slide. I think I want to pull up this one. Okay, this is a slide put together by my brother Prewrather, Aaron Eggman. He and I reached out to him via email, some time ago, and he gave me permission to use his resources. He's got a book entitled "The Saints Go Up and the Wrath Comes Down," and this is a very busy-looking timeline of the last 7 years. But I just want to draw your attention to some things. Let me zoom in a little bit. If you look at the seals as they are being depicted here, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, then we have seal 5, and then 6, and then seal 7. What's significant to notice is that, yes, according to we Prewrathers, the seals initiate, as it were, the 70th week of Daniel, the final 7 years. And it's true that the pre-trib rapturists believe that the church will be absent once these seals begin. So notice that seal number 1, and we'll look at the details later of what they entail, but seal number 1, the church should not see this seal according to the pre-trib rapturists. But what I wanted to just draw your attention to briefly at the moment is that according to the Prewrath rapture reading of these particular seals, even though the church is here, according to Prewrath and according to post-trib, by the way, even though the church is here during the opening of the seals, remember the first 4 are what we consider the 4 horses of the apocalypse, right? The 4 horses there you can see are white, red, black, and pale. Even though the church experiences those seals, if we begin to look at the details, which I will here in another slide, these seals do not have to represent the wrath of God, i.e. the wrath of Yeshua, even though he's the one that opens the seals. He's the one that allows this time period in history to begin. Indeed, if we can instead begin to realize that there is a difference between the activities of the seals and the activity of the Great Tribulation, which is right there in the middle, then we can begin to build a case that it's not Jesus or God, God ultimately overseeing this, but Jesus given the task and the permission and the authority to open the seals. It's not God pouring out wrath just yet, because the activity of Antichrist persecutes the saints and begins the Great Tribulation. And there's some theological flaws, I believe, that if it were Jesus opening the seals, then we could say that Jesus is responsible for the Great Tribulation. And if that's the case, then the martyrdom of Christians and Jews worldwide is directly Yeshua's fault. And ultimately, it's God's fault. So we're going to have to look at that particular aspect. There's another slide that we'll eventually get into as well, which will be this one. And then, now let's see. Yeah, we'll look at all these slides too. We'll also begin to look at some of the details of what the seals and trumpets and bowls perhaps do. But let's jump back over to our study. So GotQuestions.org says this is a flaw. Okay, now we're ready to turn to my study in earnest. And I reworded the title just a little bit because I thought it was a bit confusing from last time. So the new title is Prewrath Weakness Number 2. The seal judgments are not the wrath of God. And the little asterisk says, pre-tribulational rapturists think this is a weakness on the part of Prewrathers. So the label Prewrath weakness is from the perspective of a pre-tribber, meaning GotQuestions.org labels this a weakness. And so when we Prewrathers say the seal judgments are not the wrath of God, then if you're not a Prewrather, then you might think that this is a weakness on our part. So that's the position that we're going to be examining right now. What do the other positions think? Do post-tribbers believe that the seals are the wrath of God? I'm gonna have to ask that question when I need to examine that one more closely, but we're not doing that tonight. Let's jump into my own particular study. Let's start right here. Here's what I have to say. It's essential to examine carefully who opens the seals, what the seals unleash, and when the wrath of God actually begins. Let me offer a respectful and biblically grounded response from the classic Prewrath perspective. Okay, so we're going to start talking about the contents of the seals, and we're going to start asking, when does the wrath of God begin? Let's stop for a moment before we even jump into my commentary and take a look at the seals themselves, see what the contents are, and you can begin to formulate your own opinion. Are these seals the wrath of God? Is what you're reading about the wrath of God, or is this things that humans do to other humans? Is it the wrath of Satan? Let's take a look at them before we jump into my own study. Let's go over to this screen. Notice, I don't think I need to mark up on this one. Notice this is a screenshot of a graphic that shows Revelation 15 to 16 in context with a comparison of the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, and the 7 bowls. If you take the position like the pre-tribulation rapturists, that all of what you're looking at, seals, trumpets, and bowls, indicate the wrath of God or indicate the tribulation time period, then it would kind of make sense that since Jesus is the one who initiates this time period with the opening of the 7 seals, that we could see this definition of all of this being labeled as tribulation slash wrath. And therefore, since we have solid grounds on stating that the church is exempt from the wrath of God, then it just makes sense that if seals equals wrath, then, and since we are exempt from wrath, then we are exempt from the seals. Filling out my syllogism here. Let's look at them real quick. Let me just zoom in on this part right here. So notice the first seal is the first horseman. He conquers on a white horse. The second seal is the second horseman, worldwide war. Third seal, third horseman, famine. Fourth, well, I keep saying fourth. I don't have to label the judgments on the far list. Let me just read. Excuse me. Let me just read down through the seals themselves. First horseman, conqueror on a white horse. Second horseman, worldwide war. Third horseman, famine. Fourth horseman, death by sword, famine, and plagues. So those are what we call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. But then moving on down to the sixth or the fifth seal, we have the martyrs under the altar. These martyrs are a result of a worldwide persecution against the righteous people that Satan can't stand. In other words, I believe that we could easily identify this as the beginning of the Great Tribulation. So somewhere around the midpoint of the week is what we're anticipating the 5th seal to be kicked off. Reason being, Antichrist declares himself to be God per Paul's message to the Thessalonian church. And along with this message of declaration that I am God, Antichrist also chooses to implement a mark system worldwide that forces people to owe their allegiance either to him or to something else. And the alternative is that if you give your allegiance to the Antichrist, you'll enjoy a measure of protection that includes eating and buying and selling and taking place in worldwide commerce at that point in time. And if you reject the mark, you run the risk of basically losing your life or surviving in some other way. So the martyrs on the altar represent him going after specifically Christians who name the name of Yeshua, as well as Jews who refuse to take his mark and bow down to him as well. Really, he's going to go after anyone who doesn't bow down to him, but his intense hatred of God's children, Abraham's offspring, compels him to go after Israel first and her offspring second, meaning grafted in Gentile believers. Sixth seal is a terror, a great earthquake, cosmic disturbances in the sun, moon, stars, and a general day of terror. And this represents a sign, I believe, that everyone worldwide will notice, but particularly we Christians should notice that this signals the cutting short of the Great Tribulation. And then the seventh seal itself represents silence in heaven, 7 angels given 7 trumpets. At this point in time, a rapture has already taken place right after the 6th seal, but just before the 7th seal. So are the seals the wrath of God? Let's go back over to my study. First of all, it must be noted that, yes, the Lamb opens the seals, but that doesn't mean all seals that all the seal contents equal wrath. Okay, let's keep going. It's absolutely accurate that only the Lamb of Jesus is worthy to open the seals. Revelation 5 through 6:1. Go back and read it for yourself. It is true. The pre-tribbers have a case to make here when they say, well, look, who opens the seals? Is it Antichrist? Is it mankind? Therefore, they make a leap in their hypothesis, in their assertion that since Jesus is the one that opens the seals, that he must be the one that is the one, it must be his wrath that's being poured out. Prewrathers fully affirm that Christ initiates the seal sequence by opening the scroll. But here's the key distinction I go on to say. Christ does open the seals, but the contents of those seals does not automatically constitute God's wrath. And you have to follow logic here and carefully reason, would God promise to excuse his bride from his wrath and at the same time allow the church to either have to go through this time period, or would it be better to just recognize that his wrath hasn't started yet? One of the two options is in view. Opening a seal, I say, is not the same as executing wrath. The opening of the seals allows history to move forward toward the judgment of God, but that does not mean each seal is a direct act of divine punishment. So what I'm going to begin to work from is the angle that we either have to remove the church from this time period, if indeed it is the wrath of God being poured out via the Lamb, or we have to begin to recognize that the seals themselves are not yet the judgment time period, meaning God's wrath hasn't been poured out yet. Let me show you a different slide here. Give me a moment. Let's see. 7 seals. Yeah, let's jump over to this one real quick. So in this one, where's my little drawing tool? In this one, what I want to show you is that this is, again, the 7th week of Daniel. Here's all 7 seals. Notice that this is a pre-wrath perspective. First thing I want to show you is that the Great Tribulation here kicks off at the midpoint of the week, right? Midpoint of the week. This is important because the first 3.5 years does not need to be recognized as tribulation. By comparison, the final 3.5 years does contain both Great Tribulation as well as the Day of the Lord. And so by allowing for a more accurate definition of the time frames, we can see that the beginning of sorrows is this time period, the first 3.5 years. And then it's separated by the midpoint where Antichrist reveals himself to be the God of this world and demands worldwide worship. So it's within that context that we can begin to realize that the Great Tribulation, working backwards, the Day of the Lord here is definitely God's wrath, but the Great Tribulation here is not God's wrath because it's Antichrist pouring out tribulation upon those who remain faithful to God, or at least claim the name of Christ. So we have to work from the logic that why would God persecute his own children, sending them into the guillotines and the gas chambers of this time period and things like that? Now he's going to allow this tribulation, but is he directly responsible for it? Is he the author of this particular time frame? And so from that, we can then begin to realize that this stuff over here, you can see I've drawn lines between the 3 sections. There is some thematic connection. All of this spells trouble for planet Earth. All of it equals activities that really are in a ramped up position. They're in an intensified scale beginning of birth pains or sorrows, the first 3.5 years, which, excuse me, seems to correspond to, like we can see on my list here, first seal, Antichrist, second seal, war, third seal, famine, fourth seal, pestilence, thus the 4 horses of the apocalypse. Yes, that is a tribulationist period, but number 1, we don't have to label it the Great Tribulation, and number 2, we definitely don't have to label it wrath of God just because Yeshua is breaking the seals and allowing them to be poured out on planet Earth. Understand what I'm saying? Because it's not until the 5th seal, martyrdom, that we can begin to really identify that this is not God nor his Son executing wrath or martyrdom upon his children. That's probably one of the stronger anchor points that helps me as a pre-wrather remove the identification of these activities 1 through 5 seals as belonging to God or to his Son Yeshua. Now, it is true that when we get to the cosmic disturbance number 6, that this does appear to be a direct, what I like to call a supernatural intervention on the part of God himself. The cosmic disturbances of the 6th seal cut short the Great Tribulation. Indeed, they signal the imminent rapture or the imminent resurrection, the coming of our Lord. And it is that event itself, the resurrection, the rapture, the cutting short, signaled by the cosmic disturbance at seal number 6. It is that event that amputates the Great Tribulation, at least on the part of Christians worldwide, because that is our rescue operation. That's where Jesus snatches us out of the jaws of the Antichrist. The unbelieving Jewish people, Israel, who's been in hiding since the middle of the week, they don't experience the rapture, but they are in hiding. You go back and listen to last week's teaching like we talked about. Come, my people, hide yourselves while the indignation passes over you. They've been hiding from, they've been hiding from the Antichrist for as long as they could. Now they need to continue to hide themselves from the very day of the Lord activities, the wrath of God being poured out. Let's go back over to my slide. So, opening a seal is not the same as executing wrath. Just because Jesus is the one opening the seal, we don't have to leap our logic and say that it must be wrath because Jesus is opening it. It doesn't say that it's the wrath. In fact, we're going to see later on when we look at what is spoken over the 5th seal martyrdom, we're going to begin to see that this doesn't seem like God's wrath has even begun yet.